I'm Ric Edelman. On today's show, how a destination wedding can save you money, what financial advisors are saying about gold, and a conversation with BET's Bob Johnson. All that and more on this edition of The Truth About Money.
Best-selling author and founder of one of the nation's largest financial planning firms, Ric Edelman.
Weddings are one of the best days of our lives. They're also one of the most expensive. Far too many couples, in fact, end up spending so much money on that wedding that they begin their married life deep in debt, precisely creating the kind of stressful financial situation that can blow a marriage apart. But here's an idea from my colleague Brandon Corso that can help you lower that cost while still creating memories for a lifetime.
Rick, we're in maybe the nicest hotel in Washington, D.C., the Thomas Jefferson Suite here at the Jefferson Hotel. And I'm talking to Jackie Gifford, who is the travel editor for Brides Magazine. Jackie, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk destination weddings. What is a destination wedding?
Basically, a destination wedding is a wedding that's not in your hometown. And typically, some of the more popular spots are the Caribbean, the continental U.S., surprisingly enough, is actually one of the most popular places for people to do destination weddings. The cost of an average wedding these days is around $26,000, wow. And believe it or not, a destination wedding is actually $8,000 less.
Now, how could it be less with all the travel costs?
The average destination wedding size is about 75, and a regular wedding in your hometown is going to be double that. So you're spending less money because you have literally less guests. If you stay in one resort and you keep everybody at the same place, you're going to cut down on your transportation costs. Typically, many resorts will throw in tons of extras.
So you've probably seen lots of great locations. What's the ultimate location, would you say?
Oh my gosh, again, the Caribbean, Turks and Caicos is gorgeous, Jamaica, the Bahamas. The key thing for any couple is to pick a place that they love, that they're really passionate about.
Jackie, let's talk money. What's the best approach to financially prepare for a destination wedding?
Really have honest and open conversations about what you realistically can afford and try as much as you can to stick to that budget. With a destination wedding, one thing you really do have to keep in mind, you have less guests, but typically you should host people for some sort of a rehearsal dinner and welcome party, the wedding itself, and a brunch the day after. You're asking all these people to fly and travel to be with you, so you need to host them for several days worth of events. Keeping everybody in one location, it's a cost saver, but it also adds to the fun. It makes you get more time with your family and friends, but make sure that the hotel is within everybody's budget.
Do you see couples that have a great wedding and then end up with debt and regret it?
Paying for a wedding is really a group effort, and it's so important for people to be realistic and to not go into debt and to not overspend. And it's really tempting to do that. Yes, it can get expensive, but you can also have a great experience that's not $50,000. The other thing to keep in mind is you're creating a memory, and this is something that you're going to have with you for the rest of your life, and that's what makes it a valuable investment.
Brandon, always good to be with you.
Great to be here.
I was surprised by the statistic that she offered that a destination wedding is actually cheaper, about a third cheaper, right, than a local wedding.
Well, I was too, and as she explained, it's because you have less guests, and that makes perfect sense. You're not going to pay for the guest travel in most cases, so if you have less numbers, it's less expensive.
And that translates to, instead of having a 4-hour party, now you've got a 4-day party, and the memories therefore get compounded exponentially. All that's great, but we're still spending an awful lot of money in a lot of cases that people simply don't have.
Yeah, I think, as Jackie mentioned, it's all about communication. If your goal is to not overspend, you've got to talk about it. Unfortunately, today, still people feel uncomfortable talking about money. You've got to confront this head on from the very beginning. What is it that we're going to spend?
Well, who needs to be involved in this conversation? Because it's not just the bride and groom spending this money. In most cases, it's her parents. Increasingly, his parents are involved, and the bride-to-be and the groom themselves. Everybody's chipping in for this expense.
Today, that's the fact. And so all of those people have to be in the meeting and say, look, what is it we're trying to accomplish? What are our goals with this wedding? And how much money can we spend?
Now, we know as financial advisors, we come upon it all the time, that every bride we ever encounter says they want that wedding. But every wife tells us that in hindsight, they kind of wish they had spent that money on the down payment of a house.
Well, it's a lot of money to spend in a pretty quick period of time. And then when you look back on the wedding, hopefully you have wonderful memories. But that's right. The wives and the husbands think, well, what else could I have done with that money?
So hopefully they'll think about it before the day occurs. Brandon, thanks so much.
You bet.
I didn't care about healthcare until last year. Last year, I broke my wrist. I found out just how raggedy my health insurance is. Seriously, you don't know. I broke my wrist. I'm laying on the ground. Ambulance shows up. No siren. Just drove up. Said, you're not covered for siren. That's... we stop at lights with you. You got the bad insurance.
Is this statement true or false? IRA stands for Individual Retirement Account. We'll be back with the answer right after this.
At a recent conference, investment advisors were asked just one question. What did they think about gold?
Stay out of it. It's a bubble.
It's a very shiny metal that looks really great as jewelry. You know, it's not worth a darn for an investment.
No.
I think it has all the volatility of stocks and the returns of T-bills.
It's very volatile, it doesn't throw off any income, and it's something that people are advised to invest in very cautiously.
It's a glittery rock that may or may not be worth anything in the future, who knows?
Is this statement true or false? IRA stands for Individual Retirement Account. The statement is false. IRA stands for Individual Retirement Arrangement. The tax code allows you to arrange individually for your retirement. You can make these arrangements in an IRA account. There are many kinds of IRA accounts at many types of financial institutions.
Hi, Rick. My name is Wayne. I have a fairly large 401k, and I'm really concerned about it, the way things have been going the last 10 years. What's the best way to diversify so that I don't end up losing everything I put into it, or a substantial amount of it?
I'm not sure I really understand the question. I mean, if you look at your 401k balance today and you compare it to your balance of 10 years ago, you're going to discover that you have more in your account now than you did then. I don't care who you are, and I really don't care what you've been investing in. As long as you were invested 10 years ago and you continued to invest over the past 10 years, your account balance is higher today than it was then. That's important to understand because this can give you the confidence that you need to keep participating in your retirement plan at work. After all, if you were able to end up with more money over these last 10 years than when you started in an environment that really was terrible, I mean, we all know what the last 10 years was like, imagine how much money you'll accumulate if the last 10 years weren't so terrible. Imagine if the next 10 years aren't so terrible. So here's the real message. Number one, you need to keep contributing to your retirement plan at work. Number two, to help make sure that you don't make the wrong investment decision, make lots of investment decisions. In other words, it's called diversification. What you need to do is invest in a variety of asset classes. Stocks, bonds, government securities, real estate, oil and gas, precious metals, international securities. You need to buy all of it. This way, you reduce the risk that any one of those assets will fall in value while giving you the opportunity to get the returns that are provided by the global financial marketplace over long periods. Ironically, you should be excited when the stock market doesn't do well because remember, in your retirement plan, you're adding to your shares with every paycheck. Wouldn't you rather buy while prices are low? So the next time you see the market falling, say to yourself, excellent, I'm glad that I'm contributing with more of my paycheck. If you keep doing that through the rest of your career, you're going to retire in good shape. Let's head on out to Washington, D.C. Catherine, you're standing by. How are you?
Fine.
How can we help?
My daughter's father had a savings account for her, and the bank changed the name, and she went back to look for it, and they don't have a record of it. It was a savings account. All I can remember was the PIN number.
And do you know how long ago this account was established?
She was a baby.
Okay. And do you know how?
30-something.
Do you remember? You used to get statements on this account. Every so often, the bank would mail statements.
You know, he was the kind of person that kind of hid his money, you know, like that.
Okay.
And now he was trying to find it.
Okay. This is a relatively common problem that people have, where because of marriages, because of people just moving, people not, frankly, being all that careful with the monthly statements they get, they lose track of investment accounts, of insurance policies, of annuity contracts. And one day they wait a minute, I had an account at such and such, or I remember Daddy always talking about so and so, and they go to that institution and they find out the institution has changed its name half a dozen times. Maybe that institution has closed or been acquired by another. How does Catherine find this money?
Well, it sounds like it might have become unclaimed property. All states in the United States have unclaimed property laws. And if the institution that's holding money, the account goes dormant for a period of time, there's no activity, it's usually 3 to 5 years, the institution will actually send it to the state. And they'll hold it. They try to safeguard it for the rightful owner. And so Catherine can do some research. You can start by going to unclaimed.org. That's an association of all of these states that administer the unclaimed property.
So it's not just that it's a dormant account. I think it would be a step further, wouldn't it, Brandon, where the bank is sending statements and they're coming back with a bad address.
They're notifying you that the account is going to go dormant if you don't take some type of action to let them know that you're still.
Yeah. So years later, even or if not you, then your heirs may come back to that institution saying, "Where's Daddy's account? You know, he died back in the 80s, but we know there was an account at one point." The bank will no longer have records of going something back that far, but the state will have access to it. So the website, Brandon, is...
It's unclaimed.org.
How much money are the various states holding on to?
Yeah, the website says over $30 billion that they're holding, trying to give it back to the rightful owners.
And this money might be yours. So if you think that you had an account with a bank, an insurance company, a brokerage firm, and you haven't been able to track it down, go to that website, which is unclaimed.org, and Catherine, that might be able to help you out. Be aware, however, that sometimes you might discover that Daddy spent the money and closed the account. That happens too. But it's worth checking out that website. You may well discover an account that you or your family have long since forgotten about.
I'm trying to balance my portfolio. Unfortunately, I have 35% of my stocks in GE because I was a former GE employee. And when you look at the stock market, every day the volatility is so high, 2%, 3%. So is there any advice we have? How do we take 35% of my money and rebalance?
You've got 35% of your money in GE stock.
And I want to buy mutual funds.
35% of your money in GE stock. You want to sell the stock and diversify. And every time you go to do so, you see the incredible volatility, and it scares you into inaction. You don't want to sell when the stock is so volatile, because every time you look at it, you see big swings in the price. Right?
Yes.
So what do you do about that? It's real simple. Stop looking.
That's a good one.
I mean, it's really that simple. If you've got 35% of your money highly concentrated in a single stock, and I don't care that it's GE, one of the biggest companies in the world, one of the oldest companies in the world, I don't care. It is, as you know, too highly concentrated. You're making too big a bet, and we don't want to gamble your financial security on the fortunes of war involving GE. Therefore, it makes sense to sell. With your dumb luck, however, you're going to sell it today, and it'll double in value tomorrow. And that's what you're trying to avoid. So here's how you do it. You do a reversal of dollar cost averaging. Dollar cost averaging is where you contribute money on a regular basis. You're going to do the opposite. You're going to sell some shares on a regular basis. You've got thousands of shares of stock. So sell 1/10 of them every month for the next 10 months. And by doing so, you will get the average of the next 10 months. You'll get the average price. And you don't have to worry about selling high or low over the next 10 months because you'll get the average of it. So sell some of it at a regular interval. You decide the percentage and the interval. It could be 10% a month for 10 months. It could be 5% a week for 20 weeks. I mean, just do whatever you want to do. So you decide the frequency. You decide the amount. Once you decide, start and don't stop. Stop looking at the price.
Never look at the stock market.
Never look.
That's a good idea.
Because if you look, I know it's a good idea. That's why I said it. Don't look.
Thank you very much.
Hinge on $1 million. You ever get asked one of these, like, which one of your limbs would you cut off for $1 million? A friend of mine asked me which one of my senses would I give up for $1 million. I said decency. Just recently diversified my investment portfolio. I filled my gas tank up last week, and that has already appreciated 40 cents a gallon.
The government agency which enforces the laws against making and circulating counterfeit money is A, the Treasury Department, B, the U.S. Marshals Service, C, the U.S. Secret Service, or D, the FBI. Do you know? We'll be back with the answer in just a few minutes.
Bob Johnson was the founder and chairman of BET, Black Entertainment Television, the nation's first and still leading television network providing programming for the African American audience. BET became the first African American-owned company to be traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And in 2000, Bob sold BET to Viacom. He's now chairman of the RLJ Companies, which owns a variety of businesses and more than a dozen industries, all told managing over $5 billion in assets. In 2007, he was named by USA Today as one of the 25 most influential business leaders of the past quarter century. That's not what we're here to talk about with Bob Johnson today, though. There's something else that's hot on his mind as well as mine. The wealth gap between white and African American families has quadrupled in the past 30 years. According to the Census Bureau, white households have a median net worth that is 10 times higher than black households. And at least 25% of African Americans have no assets at all, according to the Institute on Assets and Social Policy at Brandeis University. It's just as bad about income. A study by the group United for a Fair Economy says that for every dollar a white person earns in income, African Americans earn only 57 cents. And these are the issues that it caused us to invite Bob Johnson to talk with us. What do we do first? How do we combat this? I mean, what's so frustrating to me is that we have never had more information, more access to information, and more opportunity, and yet, as you said, we're moving backwards in so many areas. How do we combat this?
Well, there are two things you have to do. One, you've got to get African Americans an opportunity to participate in the U.S. economic system. That means jobs. You've got to give African Americans the other element of success in this country. That means access to capital. And I propose two things to promote both of those issues in terms of a fair chance for economic success. One is a version of the NFL's Rooney Rule. The Rooney Rule of the NFL for football owners, it said before you hire a coach or a GM, you must, under penalty of a fine, interview an African-American candidate who qualified to be a coach or a manager.
You didn't have to hire him, but you at least had to give him a shot.
So I did an adaptation of that for corporations. Before you hire a vice president above, interview 2 minority candidates. Before you issue a contract for a vendor or for services, commit yourself on a voluntary basis, unlike the NFL rule, to at least interview 2 qualified minority companies. I'm launching a site called OpsPlace. OpsPlace is designed to aggregate minorities looking for jobs, minority vendors looking to be considered for opportunities, and create our own version of a monsters LinkedIn kind of site targeted for minority and African Americans to answer the age-old question that a lot of white businessmen tell me, Bob, I can't find talented minorities. I can't find a talented minority contractor. Answer is, you're not looking. The other thing is, we've got to come up with some alternatives to so-called payday lending.
Some access to effective rates of interest.
Access to lower cost interest, and I'm looking at that as an option. And the reason African Americans go to payday lenders when their car breaks down or the refrigerator goes out or the roof is leaking on after a storm, because they have no way to borrow. You mentioned the economic statistics, the income statistics. You can't go to your cousin, you can't go to the local church. The community doesn't have it.
Because they're broke too.
They're broke also. And so the issue is, we've got to provide a viable alternative so minority Americans, and not just minority, but lower income, middle income Americans, can go to places or borrow within the workforce. Why couldn't companies set up an arrangement where you can borrow against your paycheck, and instead of paying the next week, pay 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later if you got a good employment record? And we're looking at all those alternatives to increase access to capital, to increase financial information and financial literacy for financial well-being.
It's a refreshing point of view, and I really appreciate your taking the time to share it. We have so much information to cover with Bob that we're bringing part 2 in a future edition of The Truth About Money, so be sure to stay tuned for that.
The government agency which enforces the laws against making and circulating counterfeit money is A, the Treasury Department, B, the U.S. Marshals Service, C, the U.S. Secret Service, or D, the FBI. The correct answer is C. The government agency which enforces the laws against making and circulating counterfeit money is the U.S. Secret Service.
Before we go, we've uncovered some new ways of looking at things on today's program. Getting married doesn't have to mean getting in debt. Think really hard about what matters when you decide to get married, or when your son or daughter announces their engagement. And before you buy the latest hot fad, which in recent years has been gold, consider what the nation's financial advisors are saying. If they all agree that gold is suspect, you might want to think twice about buying it. And finally, Bob Johnson offered a great perspective on how we can all help minorities improve their financial opportunities. He didn't say that we need to give them a handout or a job. All Bob is suggesting is that we give minorities the chance for a job. If you're involved in hiring people, consider interviewing minorities before you award that job. You might surprise yourself by finding an outstanding candidate you otherwise might not have even met. Not only will your organization be better off, you'll be helping a large segment of our society improve their standing as well. And that's the truth about money. I'm Ric Edelman. See you next week.